to live.
Farts. Old farts. Two old farts. Steve and Dave. Sometimes you find a diamond in the rough. Not this time, though. This is just rough. Two old farts. There is no better waste of time. Two guys. Two old guys. A lot of BS and more drivel than you can shake a stick at. Steve and Dave. God help us.
Wow. Well, that's been a time. It's been a while since we played that, Steve. Because
It's been a while since we've done an interview together. I know. It's very exciting.
It seems to be we're on more of other people's shows than on our own, but that's not a bad thing.
No. People, I would get tired of seeing us, but I guess people like us. Who knew?
I get tired of seeing you, but that's irrelevant.
I get that from my wife too. Every morning she goes, "I'm tired of seeing you." I'm like, I know. So
I sort of just say mutual every time. She sends me the same thing.
Yeah.
So, there you go.
I think our whole team sends you the same thing on a daily basis. So I totally get that. So, well, it's good to have everybody here. Welcome to Two Old Farts Making Noises. We've got a guest from the Lost Dollar Business Club, and we've got a special guest. So why don't you tell us about the special guest, and the Lost Dollar Business guest is just going to magically appear.
Yeah. Well, Sander Petit. I met Sander very, very briefly many years ago. And I've been following him ever since on LinkedIn, because I know he has a real passion for music and a real passion for, to cut a long story short, for honest brokering in the music business, which is almost an oxymoron, I know, but so that's what he specializes in.
Right.
So
he specializes in oxymorons. Wow, this is exciting. I've never met an attorney like that. Yeah. This is exciting.
Well, there you go. Okay. So I thought, because of all the stuff that's happening, copyrights, I'm always falling over TikTok messages that say you can do this and you can't do that. AI has appeared out of nowhere. So there's lots of stuff that I don't know anything about, that I just make assumptions about. And of course, we know what assumptions are.
Sure.
So we thought we'd get on somebody who actually knows.
That makes oxymorons. Sure.
Yeah, it makes
this is exciting.
Yeah.
So should we bring them in?
Yeah, please.
Well, let's introduce. We'll have Sander come. Hello, Sander.
Nice to meet you. Thanks.
Nice to meet you. Thank you for being here. And then here's Kurt from the Lost Dollar Business Club. Because he's got that. Yeah. He's got that. What did that lady say? Barry White's voice was chocolate. Here's that chocolate.
She said that Kurt has a chocolate voice. Yeah.
A chocolate voice. So yes, he'll be singing Barry White songs during the interview, I think, for us. I don't know. Just kidding.
But Kurt is an old friend of mine, Sander. He also lived for a while in sunny Holland. And Kurt before he came to Holland, he was a professional musician. So I know that music is something he knows, a lot about. But yeah, what about yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself, because you specialize in the music industry. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes, for me, I think music and creative stuff started when I was really young. So one of my first babysitters was one of the first gabbers in the Netherlands. Those are the bald guys in training suits, tracksuits, listening to hardcore music. And that was the largest youth movement that we've ever known. So this was quite popular music, but it was really fast. It was a little bit too fast for me, but then he said, I have a little bit of an alternative. This is electronic dance music. And he gave me a CD when I was 6. My mom thought that was a bad idea, but I liked it. And from that point on, I basically spent all my pocket money on tapes and CDs. So I made my own mixes. Because I was not really a patient kid. I wanted to bike to school and listen to as much cool music as I could find and skip the other music. So I started blending those tracks into each other a little bit, so to save time and to listen to more cool songs. Well, then I also wanted to become a lawyer. And at the end, I kind of merged those two together. Started DJing, started organizing parties. I ran a clothing label for a while. So like the creative stuff was always a big part of my life. And I think that's where we met, David, somewhere I think it was around 2011 or 12 when I started
Yeah.
working as an attorney at law in The Hague. And that slowly progressed into running my own company, because I found out that a lot of artists and creative people don't know about law, and people who make the law, or like the old school lawyers, they don't really know what's going on in a creative industry. They've never been into a studio. They've never been to a, for example, a DJ gig. They were, so to say, more the type that would sit in a concert hall listening to Bach. But because I've always been in the two worlds, I could combine it, and from a more marketing and communication perspective, try to find out what the reader wanted to know and aim to that. So it was not only sending from an attorney to the creative industry, like, hey, this is what you need to know, and you need to pay us to explain it to you. I wanted to make it understandable, and I would like to give advice that people can actually use in what they do. And that's by placing myself into those studios as well. And I could combine it with my passion for music, because I think in the end, the greatest thing is if I can be in a full dance floor, and it only works if my client, for example, the DJ or the producer, can be free enough to experience creativity. When can you be free enough is when you don't have any problems. That could be money-wise, but also, not knowing whether the contract you signed, if that's correct or not, if you're getting screwed over. And I'd like to help with that, and then we all benefit and win, and the creative industry as a whole grows, and especially also for the Netherlands. In regard of dance music, I think we've been on top for many years, and I help people to stay on top or to get there.
Very cool. Then do you just do? Are you in just Netherlands, or are you global entertainment? Or if somebody says, I really like him, I want to use him, are you primary practicing just in the Netherlands?
Well, the formal answer should be that I am admitted to the Dutch Bar Association. Okay. And I can only practice Dutch law because I have a Dutch law degree. I completed my practical education as a lawyer, which is in the Netherlands. After you graduate, you need to be sworn in by the court, and then have another 3.5 years of education. So that's all in regard of Dutch law. But if I look at music contracts, I think 80% is a business deal. And I read a lot of business deals. I've been reading business deals for 10 years now, or even a little bit more. So yeah, my formal answer is I can only help you in regard of Dutch law, but the practical answer is the deals are not so much different. And there are many artists that ask me for help in the Netherlands doing UK or US or Japanese or Chinese deals. Right. So yeah, I got a lot of experience in that, but there's always a little disclaimer that I'm not a specialist in the US. It's like there can be differences in federal and state law as well. Right. So yeah, there's the disclaimer, but yeah, I help people basically from all over the world. Yes.
All right. Very cool. So, and the other thing is with AI coming out now. And,
that's big. Yeah.
There's a big, I know, right? There was a big article in the FT last week that said, it's kind of funny because it said anybody could be a singer now. And I thought that was funny because I was like, I don't know about that. So you have to have talent. And the article said, anybody can punch stuff into AI, but you still have to have the talent and come up. So with AI coming now, with I think Japan and a few other countries going, they have no rights. Are you seeing a lot of things in AI where musicians are saying, how do I protect? How do I do this? Or people coming to you and say, my, artificial intelligence just developed, a sonnet. How do I protect it? Or how's that looking coming in the next few years, you think?
This is the biggest point of discussion. If you look at all the legal courses and all the stuff we still need to learn and need to do, it's the main topic in all copyright discussions. Right. There's an AI Act coming. But we're still kind of unsure how it's going to work out. So lawyers, professors, etc., they are looking at how they can place the AI framework and the legal framework onto each other and see if it works. So there's a lot of inspiration from old cases, like even up to, I think, 1992, to see how we can use the lessons and the verdicts from that into nowadays society. And everybody's like trying to make it fit. There's no really successful conclusion, in my opinion. I know there have been some cases about AI and copyright, but that was really clear that there was for example, an infringement. And for a lot of AI uses, especially in regard of music and photos, it's slightly less obvious. So on images, that has been there have been some nice examples, but in music, it's still very difficult.
Okay. So the jury's
But
still
is
out,
it
as they
like
say.
when
Yeah.
Sander, is it like where when people like yourself, you said, started mixing stuff, and making mixtapes and stuff like that? Is it still a little bit of a wild west then? Is it?
Yes.
It's okay. It's okay, but
It's yes, it is still a little bit of a wild west because the copyright rules and the neighboring right rules are not super clear yet on what you can do and what you can't do. Because also there is a black box, or can be a black box, if you look at AI creation, where you don't know what's happening inside. And I think it kind of will evolve around three things about the copyright. So in the Netherlands, or at least in the EU, that is the right for the writer or composer of a musical work. So it's basically the theory behind the music. It's before you can hear it and before it's recorded. And we have a thing that's called the neighboring rights, and that protects the artistic efforts of the artist, the performing artist, and the phonogram producer, basically the master owner. And in the AI cases so far, they've been looking at what was used, what not, and what goes into the prompt, what goes out, and that is sometimes very difficult to deconstruct all the way back. The difficult thing is also, if somebody is like a human is being creative, you also have some experiences and inspiration from what was already built. So what is creativity itself? And I think it was Steven Pink who wrote down once that it's the interpretation, copying, and rearrangement of existing building blocks, and in a reaction to what's already there or where you want it to go. So that's very interesting, that if a human creates a work based on his or her or they previous experiences, that is not so much different from how AI creates work, but you don't know what's happening, and you don't know whether there are copies made, but that's more like the formal part. But that's an interesting, I like the interesting idea that AI is not so much different from human creation, actually. But the technical aspect might be, and we're trying to find a legal framework for that.
I think that, from a creative point of view, of course, artists are going to be extremely sensitive to this, because you're talking about livelihood as well as the creative side. But I'm glad that you brought up the inspirational part, because I think that gets overlooked when they start talking about technology. The other thing that I was thinking about was when sampling became an issue.
Yes.
Right, everybody was kind of doing it for a minute and making a big chunk of change, literally ripping, and then it became sampling, and then sampling became legal within certain frameworks. Now, the problem with AI is it can sample whatever the heck it wants and then just spit it out, and then the person who's punching the keys is making money, saying, basically claiming a level of, for lack of a better term, creativity.
Mhm.
Right, when in fact, A, they've got nothing to do with it. B, it's actually now pulling from a source that actually got its revenue through its creativity. So there's all these gray areas in there where you can't protect yourself on one side, and it is actually your, not just your career, but it's your very essence can now be just removed. And I can see how people are going to get their backs up, and it's going to be extremely hard to protect this industry.
Yes.
Can I backtrack a little bit on that, gentlemen, and talk a little bit about the sampling then? I always had the thought in my mind that if I sampled something, if it was longer than 30 seconds, I had a problem, but under 30 seconds, it wasn't. Is that
Right,
an urban myth, or is that a fact? Or
it's a myth, and
oh,
the easiest answer is to bust the myth and say it's not true. However,
well, I like the
so
however bit.
yeah, that's a lawyer answer, right? It depends on the circumstances and however. So there has been a court case about this from the band Kraftwerk in 2019 at the EU Court of Justice, and the verdict was if there is infringement if a sample is used and you can recognize the sample, regardless of how long it is, on the neighboring rights side. And if you look at the copyright side, it's just they look at is it the sample copyright protected, and is it used in something else that you need permission. That's basically what it boils down to. And I know that there are myths about if it's different from on 7 points, then there is no infringement, and if a sample is less than 30 seconds, then it's no infringement. That is not how we measure infringement or not. So that myth is busted. But here comes the however. The chance that if something is very short, then there's a big chance that it's not copyright protected because it's so short. So if it's just one chord, for example, or one note, then it's difficult to protect, right? Because there is not so much creativity in one note because there are only so many. So you need to start somewhere, right? But there is a little bit a range where the creativity starts. So it needs to be long enough to be protected, but that's not measured in how many seconds it is. So it can be, but not the 30 seconds or 7 points as a rule. But there is some truth in it,
Yeah, I think it's also has to do with the influence that it has on the song itself. I mean, if it actually, if the whole song is kind of written around that groove, around that hook, yeah, it's kind of hard to say, oh, I didn't steal it. Of course you did.
Yeah, there were some nice cases from the Beastie Boys, for example. They used a very short sample, but built the entire track around it.
Yeah.
And there's a little bit of a difference between the US and the EU in regard of fair use of music, etc. We don't have the fair use doctrine. So fair use is basically you can use it under certain circumstances that do not harm the original use of the track or the sample. We don't have those measures. I think that's basically coming forward that in the EU, copyright and intellectual property is seen something that protects the bond between the maker and the work. So it's like the nature philosophy of IP actually. And in the US, it's more like an economical right. So it leans a little bit more towards damaging the economical position and the possibilities of trade from creativity. And that's, I think, the fair use kind of fits into that, I think.
I wonder how Dr. Dre's doing on all this because, a lot of his revenue was derived from guys like Joe Cocker. Used outside of the context of Joe Cocker's music.
Yeah, I heard P. Diddy, Puff Daddy, I'm not sure what his current alias is, said he's still paying like $5,000 a day for his use of every breath you take.
Yes.
So yeah, I think in the end it all got sorted, and otherwise people will wait until enough money is generated and then they start a court case, because this is what you see with plagiarism and sampling, especially in the US. Litigating is super expensive, and so you only will start a case if it generates enough money.
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask you then something about, because I get all this stuff that people show me on TikTok, and it's always got music, and I think, well, how the hell did they get away with that? I mean, because I always had in my mind that 30-second rule, of course, but that's wrong. So hands up to that.
Yeah, it
how
depends.
Does that happen?
It depends who has the rights to what. So if you take it as a basis, we're looking at copyright and neighboring rights system. So copyright, again, for the text and composition itself, and the neighboring rights for the protection of artists and the master owners, which can be the same person, by the way, but just let's not dive into that now. So how does this work usually it's an exclusive right. So you can grant somebody else permission, and for the neighboring rights, you need to get a reasonable reimbursement. But we've got collective rights organizations collecting license income and giving permissions for other people to either publicly perform the copyright or neighboring right and to reproduce it. So it's undoable for a music writer to go to every cafe and every radio station and all the DSPs like TikTok, Spotify, etc., to grant permission to do something with their work. So the collective rights organizations do that. If they have a mandate for online, etc., on demand or not, radio, TV, it really depends on the deals and if they are, for example, granted this permission by a government. So our public performance organization in the Netherlands, BUMA, has got a legal monopoly on doing what they do. So they're actually appointed, and it's in a law. So then it depends. Does TikTok have the right licenses, or is the music available on TikTok either granted approval granted by, for example, the record label or the music publisher if the rights are transferred to those? Or do the artists and writers and master owners just accept it that it's on TikTok because, you know, TikTok can be really a big boost for your career if your track goes viral or if your composition goes viral in a sync maybe, you know. So in the end, it's a question of who has the rights to do what. And if there are no rights, are you willing to accept that the use is maybe illegal, but it can make you famous? So it's a kind of a difficult question and answer to find out, and it's one of the big problems of the music industry is the fragmentation of all rights, and to find out where you need to ask permission and who has a mandate for what. But the short answer to your question, how does music end up on TikTok? Well, because it can make you go viral, and that is very important right now.
I guess that would also generate a completely different response between the big labels and all these, you know, maybe smaller independents, because the independents might actually see it as a cash cow.
I think both see it as cash cows. I mean, at the you get a lot of data on Spotify and SoundCloud, especially Spotify and TikTok, what works or not. So people are basically writing TikTok music. If you look at the more mainstream or money-focused record labels or musicians, you'll see that happening because you just know what you need to do in the first 30 seconds to keep people engaged in your track, and you can see the skip rate and you can see when they skip it and what works or not. You can really dive into what's going on. You can see artists writing tracks with the same name of a very popular shoe at the moment, for example, in the hope that every video that somebody posts about the shoe will include their track. Mm-hmm. So if I want to make a song about good, or an Instagram post about good weather, you know, if the track is, if you make music naming sunshine or a heat wave in Amsterdam, then it's very likely that people will say, "Oh, that's a nice track to put under my video," and maybe you get picked up.
They bust around with Courvoisier.
Yeah, those are examples, and I think that is, you know, especially in the rap world, they want to show that they're rich, so they rap about very exclusive and posh brands. They sometimes even include it in their artist name, like Gucci Mane. I'm not really sure if Gucci is super happy about it, but I think it will increase their sales because he's a famous rapper right now, you know. So yeah, there it works. It's interesting to see because there are all kind of IP related questions, and do you want to be associated with something? Does it help your brand? Does it damage your brand? I know Louis Vuitton had a problem with an artist using their bags in an artwork from hunger in Africa to, you know, at the one side show the poverty and desperate needs of people for food, and on the other hand that people can splurge thousands of euros on a bag. You know, so it works two ways.
Yeah.
So if you're an artist starting out between AI and writing your own songs and whatnot, do you have certain advice that you give them? I know the big thing with Taylor Swift a couple years ago was her masters, right? You
Yes.
always have to retain your masters. You have to retain this. You have to retain that. So just say Kurt and David decide they're gonna, and I are gonna have a trio, and in the summer we're gonna break up into a smaller group. But the question would be, what advice would you say to someone who's starting out, or even someone who's been doing it a long time that's kind of just got the shaft over the years? What would you say to them? Like, here's like the top 5 things that you should do to protect yourself.
I think only a few of them are legal. Yeah, to be honest, I mean, the most important thing is to kind of know what you're doing, why you do it, to engage with the people you want to make music for, but and have fun and try stuff, connect with other people, and be creative. I think that's the most important. But if you look at the legal side, and I think that's where it goes right or wrong, is whether you sign contracts or not that you do or do not understand, or sign away too much rights. Although, this is not always a bad thing. I think Taylor Swift was kind of lucky that she could still control her publishing rights and therefore could re-record the compositions and lyrics into new masters. And those new masters got uploaded on Spotify and generated money, and not the old ones that Scooter Braun or his investment company had. So, but it's not necessarily bad to transfer masters or transfer rights, as long as you get something that's connected to the worth of it. Meaning that if you transfer everything, or just even assume via a work for hire construction that the rights are somebody else's, you need to get paid top dollar. If you sign away a little bit less, or make a transfer maybe not exclusive for the entire territory, meaning that if you have good connections in the US and Canada, maybe just sign away the rights for that, and maybe you need to sign away rights for the rest of the world to some local company that is willing to pay you much more, and then it will be more effective having them handle those rights. And you will maybe get paid a little bit less for a license. But in the end, what it comes down to is, if you know what your rights are, then you can make aware deals about it. I think aware deals are usually smart deals. I think a good deal is a measurable deal. It's like the SMART goals. If you look at the setting your own personal goals, for example, it's a measurement. No open ends if possible. And from that situation, so awareness, smart deals, I think will come less problems and more money. Less problems and more money will lead to more freedom, and more freedom will lead to more creativity. If you get into that system, you're kind of ending up in an upward spiral. And knowing how finance works and knowing how the law works are, I think, two very important aspects of getting into that upward cycle. Just to give you an idea, the Dutch first dance DJs from back in the days, they made a lot of money, and then they forgot to keep all the receipts from the records they bought. Then because it became so popular, our tax authority said, well, we're now going to tax you for a lot of money because that's what you made with all the gigs. And they didn't have any deductible costs because they paid cash or threw away all the receipts. And I think from the first generation, many of them had problems for years and kind of slided down that hill. I think if they have signed away all the rights and didn't get a lot of money for it, and threw away all the receipts because they didn't have any tax knowledge, only a few of them are still relevant and going around. But the biggest part did it for fun and had a lot of troubles. I think that is a good example of why you should know what rights are and how finance works in a part of your career as a musician. But that's of course no guarantee that people will like your stuff and that you will like your stuff.
Right.
So yeah, there's only like a small legal part to it, but it is important if you want to make a next step. If you don't want to make a next step, then just make cool music, right?
Can we just touch on a couple of things? I don't know if it's possible to do it very shortly. You guys are talking about masters.
Yeah.
For those people who don't know what that is, I'm not really sure myself. And you're also talking about, like giving stuff away. What would you give away? Again, Not like
It could be the publishing rights or the master
Okay.
rights, basically. So the copyrights and the publishing rights, you can have a discussion if those are the same, or if the publishing rights are a part of the copyright. And then also you can have a discussion about whether you can transfer them to another party if you have already transferred that to a collecting rights society, such as Buma Stemra. But that's more like the technical aspect. I think so. The copyrights or the rights to the composition or lyrics are usually transferred to a publisher, and the publisher will exploit those rights by either making sheet music, if that still happens, by exploiting your lyrics or for merchandise. And nowadays, more important, but also at the current use in the music industry, a little bit quiet. The syncs. A sync is basically a connection between visuals, could be a game, movie, commercial, with copyright and music. So it's kind of a triangle. So if you want to use somebody else's music under your video, you need permission from the copyright and the neighboring rights holders, and that could be the publisher and the record label, or the author and artist individually. But that's. Sorry, I forgot your question.
Remember, he bills by the hour, David. So he's forgetting your questions.
I'm very much aware of that as well. And I don't want you to. I don't want you to be telling it. I'm not. Trying to encourage you to give away free sandwiches, Sander.
No, I got it again. I got it again. It was about publishing.
It's about masters and stuff. So what is a master then? Just very quickly, what would be a
master? Is the first recording of sound, and a master owner is the party that takes the initiative and carries responsibility for the recording. And that is
the recording studio itself then?
That could be. That could be. I think this is one of the biggest misconceptions of the music industry, is that the record label is always the master owner, because this is not true. If you look at the law, at least the Dutch law, and taken into a European perspective, it is the party that takes initiative and carries the risk or the responsibility. Meaning that if you are a studio producer and you are working in Cubase or Ableton or whatever, and you're making the composition, you're playing it via a keyboard and you're pressing record, you're then sending it to a label. The label has the position to reject the track or not. Then you can sign a contract saying that the record label is the master owner, but it's not by law. And this is what Martin Garrix, the Dutch famous DJ, has been litigating about for, I think, 6 years with his former record label, Spinnin' Records, which was the largest independent record label in the EDM before it got sold. But our Supreme Court actually went with him in his argumentation that he was the master owner, in fact. So this is something that not many artists know, is that if they basically create and record a track themselves, then they are the master owner. And this is different from how law practically worked back in the days, where a studio, like a physical studio, with all the different techniques and plugins, would cost hundreds of thousands of euros or dollars, or not even more. And the law was actually there to get a return on that investment. That is the basis of the Neighboring Rights Act. But it changed very much when people started making music electronically with a laptop and, for example, a plugin and some computer programs. So master owners are the owners of the first recording of sound, being the party that took the initiative and the responsibility for making such a recording.
And how you find, or what is your experience with artists right now? Because obviously, especially with the larger labels, they're going back to, enforcing the 360 style of contract, right? Because obviously they're top heavy and they've lost a lot of money since the whole digital revolution of music kind of went against them. So now they want the merchandise, they want to sink their teeth into the concerts, they want everything, right? How are you finding that's now playing out post-COVID?
Two things. I think we have to keep in mind who actually owns Spotify. Mm-hmm. Those are the big record labels. And on second, I think it's difficult if a party wants a piece of something that they did not contribute to. And I think the question if a party contributed to something, it needs to be measurable. I somehow understand that some record labels or booking companies or agencies or management, they're getting from all sides. They're getting a little bit of every pie. There are, it really depends. If you, for example, have a record label and you do label nights and you give a stage to your artists and writers to show themselves, and they get new gigs from that because they get stage experience or a possibility to put their music out, and you invite a lot of executives or other artists or producers, and something comes from that, I understand that you could get a piece of the pie. If you arrange for a band that there's a merchandise table at the end, that it looks good, that there are salespeople there, etc., it's not a bad idea to actually get a piece to reimburse your efforts in that regard. But what I oppose is that people are just grabbing, putting their hand in every jar and just claiming the money. So you need to work for it. You don't get it for free. Don't just ask for free because you need to make more money. It's usually not the artist that gets super rich out of the deal. It's usually always the record companies, the publishers, etc. Not to bash them, but if there is a contract written, it's always written from the perspective of the record label and the publisher.
Yeah.
So as much as they work with music rights and music and doing cool stuff for that, they're also a party that work on contracts on a daily basis, and there's a disbalance between what a record company or a music publishing company know and what they can dictate in the contract to the creative. And that balance should be a little bit restored. I think there are, a creative could ask, what do you actually do for a percentage of my merchandise rights? Can you make that concrete? Because then it's also something I can keep you on your end of the deal. And you can make a difference, for example, between procured deals and not procured deals, or even kickback if a deal comes forward from a writer or an artist and that the record label, for example, is only handling it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a little bit based on negotiations. I've seen it happening for the past 10 years, going back and forth a little bit. Like 2012 to 2017, the 360 deal was a big deal. I've rarely seen it succeed because I think a lot of parties signing it, they don't have the super specialists in the inner team from a bigger company. And now you see, in the Netherlands at least, you see more and more sync agencies popping up, and they specialize in a really certain or small aspect of the, for example, high fashion industry or more the museum industry or games, etc. And they are usually better at their job, I think, because that's what they do all the time, than a general music publisher that's maybe want to get some money from it, but not necessarily have the contacts or skill to do it.
Because that for me was kind of, when we were talking about AI, this is the murky water for me, where I kind of see the Milli Vanilli effect coming back into play, where, basically you've got the AI or whoever's governing the AI machine, if you will, being kind of almost like a ghostwriter. So yes, you can do it, but you've got absolutely no power, right? And the labels can do with you what they want, basically, and pay you whatever they feel, because you're technically not creating it.
Yes, yeah, that's very difficult. I don't have a clear answer or solution to that system, but luckily the law is lately helping us a rather lot. There are more and more sounds, and I think to create a level playing field and attention for a certain issue at this point of time, it's because of social media and the reach of certain actions, it got bigger to try to change stuff. That's, I think, what's been going on in the Netherlands, is that the lawmakers have been trying to create a level playing field and improving the situation of the personal, like the maker or the artist, in relation to the companies that exploit their music. And I think we made big steps in that in 2015, and the EU then took over some of those steps. in a process up until 2021. So we were kind of ahead, but yeah, it's getting better, and it's nice also for us as a lawyer to help improve or create a level playing field and a reasonable music industry where everybody gets paid, instead of one party getting paid a lot, the other party getting paid so less that it's not a sustainable system in the end of time. And I think that's also something that we do with Backstage Legal, as we are all independent artists, or independent attorneys, but also we all have a double feature working as a creative. And it's nice to discuss those kind of things with each other. And if you try to make a movement with 4 lawyers, for example, in regard of hypothetical costs in contract. So just briefly how that works. Sometimes you see in publishing fund agreements that they say, well, the general costs of running this music fund are set to 15%. You never know if that's actually true, but it's very difficult to know what the exact costs are. The music publishing company will never tell you, and I think it's just another margin on top of what they already get out of the deal. I think it's unreasonable, and we all do. And if you tell each other let's put our foot down in negotiations and create a broader audience for this standing point, then we make the music industry better. Why is that important? If everybody feels happy, there are less problems, there is better music.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, Sander, thank you so much. It was very informative. I mean, for me, and I'm a lay person, I've heard me sing, so you won't be representing me in song anytime soon. But the people that are starting out, or even the people that are in the business, I think this has been probably more education than most of them have ever gotten in their life about legal and whatnot. And at some point, we'd like to have you, I guess, come back and talk more about the AI. Because I think over the next 6 months, that's going to develop into something with all the new things that are coming out. I think that's going to be the next, as to Kurt's point, Milli Vanilli, which is kind of it, right? Because it's going to be a machine that you give an idea to. So it's going to be what is considered, to your point, is it creative like a human, or is the human punching the buttons?
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be a very interesting dialogue that we can have down the road, which is very cool.
I think we need to keep an eye out on the EU AI Act, which is coming up. I'm not really sure if there's a date stamp on it yet, but that will be.
We certainly like to have you back, Sander, if that's when that will come about.
Yeah, and if there are any interesting court cases, I can send them over.
Sure.
It's usually at this point of time.
Just come back on the show and talk about them. This platform is a bit like what you guys are trying to do. We're trying to open it up so everybody has a voice. Stephen and I are in a position where we can do that for everybody. And So anything anybody wants to say anything, you can always come back on, and we'll just open the show up and do what we've just done with you, invite them to the dinner table.
Yeah, that'll be great.
There you go. Gentlemen, thank you. And for everyone listening on podcasts, thank you. Don't forget to like, subscribe. If you're watching us on YouTube, sorry. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And now David's going to play his most exciting part, which is the ending. And all Sander's information will be here below, everybody.
Well, sadly, this is the end of today's show. A really big thank you to everyone who contributed today to the show. And of course, thank you to my co-host, Stephen Oldfart. I'm David Oldfart. Don't forget, subscribe to the show and get all the latest updates from Two Old Farts Making Noises.